So I know you've done a bunch of these before, and I, obviously have a lot of questions about IQBAR and sort of the origin of the company and kind of how you launched it and how you grew it over the past couple of years. But obviously, I think to like get the full story, we have to go back a little bit and get a little bit more of kind of your background and just kind of what you were doing before you started the company. I know you had a short sort of consulting stint, and then before that, in terms of just college, Harvard, and before that, I think you grew up in, is it New Jersey, right, or somewhere on the East Coast? Yeah. So during kind of like the college years and right after college, did you have did you have aspirations of starting a company? Was that on your radar at all, or was it kind of just graduate, get a job, and kind of see where things go?
I always wanted, no, is the short answer. I didn't know that I wanted to start a company. I was always obsessive about something. So I was obsessed with chess for a period of time in middle school. And then I was obsessed with cross country. And then I was obsessed with soccer. And then that soccer obsession carried through into high school. And I thought I wanted to play D1 soccer. And so I was always obsessed with something. And I would say probably in college, that obsession turned into wanting to start a company. And I had no idea what, but I wanted to create something out of thin air and make a lot of money and be my own boss and all the cliche things that I think a lot of people want. Of course, like you actually get into it as an adult and all these priorities shift and change. And but I would say I started getting interested in entrepreneurship in college, and also startups became kind of cool at that point. It was like 11, 12, 13, 14. And, the social network had come out, and it was cool to take a job at a tech startup versus take a job at a big bank and things like that. So definitely, so that was when the spark sort of emerged. And then, I didn't really know how to apply that spark. And I wasn't an engineer, so I wasn't going to create a tech product. And there's really no playbook for creating physical products, startups.
Yeah.
So I just took a software job out of school selling and marketing software to oil and gas companies. Like, it was one of the 500 things that I checked on the career services site that didn't require a cover letter, and had an interview and got it. And it was a job.
Yeah.
But realized that was not my passion. And software was not my passion, and oil and gas was not my passion, and got really into nutrition. This was like 2015, 16. And the added desperation of like understanding what a job is and kind of dreading Mondays and looking at like, oh, am I going to do this for the next 30 years? That like is a really powerful force. And that like pushed me into, okay, what could I create? And so I started just tinkering with ideas.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of push and pull to kind of bring you over to, the entrepreneurial dark side, I guess, exploring ideas. And I mean, did you have other people in your sphere that like were doing it? Did you know friends, colleagues, coworkers, other students, or was it, I mean, for me, it was all stuff I saw, like, literally, like you said, the social network, and I saw news headlines, and I knew of startups, but I didn't have anybody in my, in my world doing it. So I sort of got on the corporate track, and I did that for like 10 years before I kind of went out on my own. But so you didn't really have kind of somebody that that you saw doing it?
No, not at all. And certainly not in the physical good world. Like, what was cool was doing a website or an app, or, the tech world was what was cool. Like physical products, like no one talks about that. Zero people. So it's not cool to start a protein bar company. So not only did I have no one, peers who were doing it, but I like really had no one who was even looking at a food startup, let's say. So No, I mean, but I was cool with that because I don't know. I like doing different things. I like swimming against the current. I don't know. I looked at like all of the playing fields or all of the games I could choose, and I'm like, if I go into like investment banking, can I win that game? If I go into consulting, can I win that game? No, there's no freaking chance I win either of those games. Okay, if
Yeah.
I start like a protein bar company, can I win that game? Maybe, maybe. So I think game selection is incredibly important, like arguably the most important thing. And people kind of gloss over that. They're like, well, just work hard and excel. And well, yeah, you can do all those things and still not win the game because you picked the wrong game. Um, so I think it was actually a good thing that, no one else was doing it because I forged my own path.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you're thinking through all that stuff, so this is, I kind of struggle sometimes to like explain to people, like, is this a marketing podcast? It is a sort of entrepreneurial podcast. And I feel like it's a little bit of both because like my background is marketing. It's what I'm super interested in. And one thing I've kind of noticed is that a lot of founders either like really like gravitate towards the marketing or they're just kind of naturally good at it, even if it's not, their background. Or they just kind of learn right away, I've got to get good at this really quick. If this is going to go anywhere, it's just kind of part of the process. What was your kind of background in marketing, attitudes toward it? Did you kind of enjoy that stuff? I mean, obviously you first had to like come up with the idea and figure out what it is that you were, going to market. But, did you have any of that interest or the experience or the background?
No background and no experience and no interest. Still have very little interest in marketing.
Yeah.
I like product. That's what I like. And so that's okay. Like you're right. You absolutely need to be great at marketing. Just like you have to be great at sales, just like you have to be great at ops, just like you have to be great at finance to build a great business. But you personally don't have to be great at all those things or even interested in all those things. That's why teams exist. That's why third parties exist, right? So I think it's just like, what can I be world class at? And there's really a couple of things. Like number one is product and strategy around product um, and all the operations and supply chain inherent to a product. And then the second thing is like at an even much higher level, being a good, uh, project manager of many disparate things. So on the micro, it's like product. On the macro, it's how do I build the right team and in a hub and spoke model, how do I surround the hub of a small group of great people with a bunch of really good third parties. And so on the marketing side, I actually hired my wife, who was in the ad agency world, as our first CMO, and she's obsessed with marketing, and especially in a quantitative sense. And then she and I interviewed and hired a really great Amazon agency, a really great D2C paid ads agency, a really great email marketing agency, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so just because that's not my core competency or frankly interest, uh, doesn't mean that I don't have to like take it extremely seriously and put the right people in the right seats around it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would argue sometimes that like marketing is one of those weird areas of a business where there's all the kind of overlap and the kind of gray area between like, marketing and sales, marketing and product, marketing and um, being the leader of a company, because the things that make you good at both are like really, really, really having a clear like understanding of who the audience is, whether you're trying to promote something to them and sell it or market it, or understand how to make the product better or to come up with new products. There's all these things that like I feel like are kind of skills that you have to have that even if it's not a purely like in the marketing org, it's definitely feels like there's a lot of crossover. So um, Yeah, and like you said, one of the biggest things of just those early days, or real honestly any stage, is just finding finding the right people who are really passionate about those different areas and hiring them, and sometimes just getting out of the way. But like you said, you also have to like have a deep understanding of kind of what's happening under the surface and understanding the customers, and sort of guiding the ship
Yeah,
without
like
without running every gap.
we've done everything
Yeah,
ourselves internally before we hired a third party.
yeah,
Maybe not at the highest level, but we really deeply understand it, and that's so important to then audit a third party and keep them honest.
yeah.
Um, so we manage Amazon before we had an Amazon agency. Just ran paid ads before we hired a paid ads third party, right? And that's also just there's two different sort of like schools of thoughts or paths of outsource versus insource, and there's no right answer. We could have easily just grown our team and
Yeah.
insourced the whole marketing entity. We just learned a hybrid was better.
Hmm.
Um, so
Yeah. Yeah. I'm actually probably getting ahead of myself because I want to ask you a little bit about, just coming up for the idea behind the company, and you had this interest uh, in sort of health and nutrition, and like specifically like the protein bar space. And I'm guessing that was like the like that, vertical was just probably huge at that time and has been huge for a while. But how did you kind of land on the specific idea or the positioning around IQBAR? And I guess specifically, how did that kind of lead you into, I think the entire process of like doing the Kickstarter? Because that's kind of how you kind of first got things going, right?
yeah. So I was interested. I was kind of agnostic around what the form factor was that I would create. I originally was going to start a drink company because I read a book called Mission in a Bottle by Seth Goldman and Barry Nailbuff, who started Honest Tea. And I just fell in love with the story, and I really resonated with Seth's backstory because we had all these similarities between us. And I was like, all right, I'm going to start a drink company. But I just kept like cycling through ideas and refining that concept. And I was like, wait a second, this is like the hardest vertical in all of food and bev. You're going to have to raise $1 zillion. It's refrigerated, blah, blah, blah. And so I just ultimately arrived at like, what's a better category or what's a better category? And also, as I was thinking this through, I was like, what's my angle? And my angle ultimately became, nutrition meets cognition. No one was really doing that. And I mostly arrived there because I had a personal interest in that. I studied psych and neuroscience in college. I was really interested with the brain. And also, like, I just care about how my brain works on a daily basis. We all do. And I was tired of eating crappy food that made me mentally sluggish on a daily basis. So I'm like, what if I could create something, a food or beverage product that was sort of optimized for the brain? Because there's so much body functional stuff, weight loss, digestion, building muscle. Like, why is there nothing that's brain focused? And eventually I arrived at bars because it's really attractive for a variety of reasons. All those downsides of beverage don't exist with bars. It's shelf stable, it's light, it's ship friendly, it's e-com friendly. It's a giant category. The addressable market's huge. It's easy to manufacture. It's just a great form factor. Now, the barriers of entry are low because of that, and so it's a crowded category. But if you can make it work, you can build a really good, big, profitable business in that category. So it wasn't the first idea. It was sort of like a evolving thought process that allowed that I arrived at.
Yeah. And then when you did kind of land on IQ Bar, or maybe not even the name yet, but just the idea behind it, how long till you kind of started doing some real like market research? And I think I've heard conversations that you've had before that, like, in a lot of ways, like I think you did the Kickstarter just to kind of prove out the concept a little bit, and that was in some ways a form of market research. Like, if there's enough interest in this, maybe we got something and we keep going. how did you start? Like, how did you start? Where did you start? Like talking to people to see if this was something that like could look great on paper, but like something that people would actually, be interested in, they'd pay for.
Yeah, I mean, I think people think of Kickstarter the wrong way. They think it's some way to raise money, and it's really not, because your unit economics will be so bad, and you're going to have to pay to drive people to your Kickstarter page, and it's just not. And in my view, the real value of Kickstarter is what you just said: prove out the point. Does anyone want this? Is there a market for this? Is your idea good or bad? And so, and then also it solves the chicken or egg problem of like, I don't have any money to produce inventory. Like, consumer goods, you're making physical stuff and you got to pay in advance to make all that stuff. And so you can either raise money with just a PowerPoint deck, or you can do a Kickstarter, generate a bunch of sales, and then turn around to investors and say, hey, it's not just a PowerPoint deck. I also have all these sales, and I've also proved out the idea, and I've de-risked it for you. And that just allows you to command a higher valuation, and just get people over the finish line in general. And so that's how I viewed it. So yeah, I mean, I recommend that. I think it's a great first step. Now, it is insanely stressful, insanely challenging. It's so hard to convert people to do a Kickstarter, right? Because it's, on the face of it, a terrible proposition. I give you money and you give me something in 6 months.
Yeah.
And then it might turn into 9 months, and then the thing might suck because it's the first time you ever made the thing. Like, it's a terrible proposition for the consumer,
Yeah.
but great proposition for the entrepreneur.
Yeah. And that was probably one of the first times you had to maybe go out and do, some real marketing, some real promotion where you're like, yeah, I got to get in front of a bunch of people, the right people, see if you can get them to convert. How did you kind of approach that? Was that the challenging part you just talked about?
Yeah, because standard, meta ads don't work for Kickstarter, for example. It's already hard enough to get a decent customer acquisition cost when you can fulfill it tomorrow. Now try to convert someone when you're not going to fulfill it for 6 months. Like, it's not going to happen. So now there are some third parties who have these like lists of people who have backed projects in the past, and you can serve paid ads to them and it converts higher. But they take like 30% of all sales, and it's like, it still doesn't pencil out. So traditional mechanisms just don't work. So quite frankly, we employed some, I would say, gray hat tactics. We basically aggregated a zillion email addresses from, it's a long story, but I'll do the spark notes of how we did it. I was able to, I went to Harvard undergrad and I was still in Boston, and I was able to pull email addresses out of these physical books, thousands and thousands and thousands of them, of like alumni books. And then I separately got a Harvard Business School login, and I was able to pull, I think it was like 80,000 emails out of that. And then I pulled emails from my high school database, my parents' college database, like anywhere that had a login. And I had one little tenuous connection with the person. Hey, I was class of whatever. Here's this new project. Mm-hmm. It would mean the world if you checked it out. Anyone that I even had that little shred of commonality with, I added to our database, and then made a MailChimp account and just blasted these people. And of course, they never opted in, and a million people marked it as spam, and MailChimp shut us down. And then we said, oh, sorry, we didn't know. And then they put us back up, and then we did it again. And then, but by the time they shut us down a second time, we had already gotten every email out. Mm-hmm. And that was the single biggest thing we ever, we got, I don't know, $30,000 of sales just from that. And it was free, right? Like zero customer acquisition cost of zero. And then half our sales came from Kickstarter organic. So that just helped us keep momentum and stay on the front page of food and beverage, the food and beverage section. And then we got all these organic purchases. So for every purchase we drove, another organic one came along with it. Yeah. And then there's all these other tactics. We weaseled our way into their newsletter that goes out to all the Kickstarter, previous Kickstarter backers. And so we had to get really creative on how to drive sales with like $0 customer acquisition costs.
Yeah. Yeah. I love hearing stories of like those early days of, the hack, whatever marketing hack or fake it till you make it or whatever, gray area of, people getting in front of folks, whether it's like emails or ads or, those are always kind of fun to hear about because, but again, that's like another way, even if some of those things don't really working out, like I always think of that as like, just again, another form of market research that you're, maybe learning kind of quickly, like, okay, that was like, we tried that, it didn't really work. And then, that's 99% of marketing is just, failing a bunch of times really quickly and learning and trying something new and, doing it fast. So, I'm guessing from the success of the Kickstarter, like it obviously worked out because you guys were able to kind of take that and turn that into inventory and then sort of grow from there. What was like when things did like kind of start to get going, what did marketing look like for you guys? Or was it just all kind of a blur because you were, selling and then just like immediately trying to figure out inventory? What did those early days look like when started going?
So Kickstarter rolled in, like we rolled out a D2C site, and then you can have like a button on your Kickstarter campaign once it's expired that directs people to your site.
Yep.
So we had all this overflow volume. And actually we first overflowed it to Indiegogo. So we did like 75K in sales on Kickstarter, and then we got another 15K and spillover. You can basically carbon copy Kickstarter and make an Indiegogo campaign and get all your spillover sales. So then we got another 15K from that. And then both of those we redirected to a D2C site. And so, for that first little chunk of time, we got traffic from those campaigns. And then we had all these people and we had this email list, the starter email list. And, basically tried to drive repurchases via email marketing. But yeah, then thereafter, we started the basic blocking and tackling that kind of everyone does, which is meta ads, right? SEO, churning out blog posts. And then shortly after that, we rolled out an Amazon store and started doing, paid search advertising on Amazon. So just sort of like the blocking and tackling everyone does. I guess the nuance with us would be we went really hard after Amazon when this, I don't know if you recall this, but like there was a time when there was a schism in e-commerce where people were like D2C maxis, where it was like, you have to own your data and you have to own the customer and don't pay Amazon fees. And it was just like D2C or die. And we never felt that way. And we didn't feel that way because we started selling an insane amount of product on Amazon, like 4x what we sold on D2C. And so, and I think this is, by the way, very category specific. So, protein bars are different than, let's say, eyeliner. And maybe a woman is way more likely to go to the eyeliner website and buy that than someone who's buying a protein bar, because they're buying a protein bar in addition to chips, in addition to shampoo, in addition to toilet paper, whatever. And it just is one of those things that people go to Amazon for, right? You're not going to go to all of those things individual D2C site that you'd be on D2C sites all day as a consumer. So I think we always felt you're crazy not to go hard after Amazon early. And we still feel that today. Now, everyone's come around to that. Like anyone who wasn't on Amazon now is, because CACs kept going up and they're like, oh crap, this is silly. Why are we not going where consumers are shopping? So I guess maybe that's one nuance of what we did marketing wise, but it was all direct response marketing. Like we did no top of the funnel stuff. Even did it, we last year, 5 years in, was our first year where we started really investing in top of the funnel marketing. Everything was direct response until then.
Yeah. And whether it was like the Amazon or similar channels or D2C, in the early days, or I guess really any stage that you guys have been at, how much of effort did you guys have to put in on, just kind of educating your audience of the benefits, or specifically, not that you were necessarily making any big claims about, oh, our product's going to do XYZ for you, but just kind of educating them on, here's the ingredients, here's this, really the science behind it for like brain health. Was that something you guys had to do a lot of, or was that just like a pretty straightforward just kind of message, which is, hey, yeah, we're a protein bar, but we've got a specific, angle that we're taking.
Well, so the cardinal sin of marketing is market what you want to market versus what works. And so I would say we really wanted the brain angle was the most differentiated thing about us. And so, of course, you think, oh, cool, we're a protein bar, but for your brain. And we were quite humbled because we get back data and we look at data and we make rational, logical decisions based on data. And basically what we learned is actually most people don't care about that. Or they might care about it, but it's not like the first, second, or third reason they buy our product. It may be the fourth, maybe the fifth. And so order of operations of what you highlight and what you call out, it turns out is extremely important. And so if you lead with the brain thing, you probably ostracize the consumer or intimidate the consumer. Versus if you lead with, hey, this is a 12 grams plant protein bar that only has 1 gram of sugar and tastes great. By the way, it has these brain nutrients that are added. Want to buy? That is the correct order of operations versus, hey, here's this like brain food thing. And oh yeah, it has 12 grams of protein and 1 gram sugar. So those are like radically different and convert radically differently. And so you just have to understand what consumers in your category care about, are looking for, shop based on, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, the same consumer will shop different categories differently. So the same person might go into Whole Foods and they go to the bar aisle and they turn over every bar and they're analyzing how clean's the label, da, da, da. And then they go to the chip aisle and they just like grab a thing of tortilla chips. Because the way they think about tortilla chips is just in a category specific way, and incredibly different than the way they think about and analyze bars. So you just have to understand your category and how consumers shop your category.
Yeah. Was there like a light bulb moment where you guys kind of came to that realization, or just kind of something you slowly learned as you were?
Slowly learn. I mean, not that slowly. We learned pretty quick.
Yeah.
You get this is the beauty of e-commerce. You get a ton of feedback via reviews, via post-purchase surveys, via just ABCD testing. So actually we learned it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Our first product didn't have protein. And so it was just brain food. And it wasn't actually that low sugar. It was 8 grams of sugar. It was low-ish sugar, but not ultra low sugar. And so we kept getting people saying, hey, this would be cool if it was 1 gram of sugar. Or, hey, have you thought of adding protein? Like, I love this, but I would really love it if it had protein. And so actually feedback then informs the product evolution just as much as it informs the branding, call out hierarchy, which call outs you should kill, which call outs you should promote. So the product's also never done. And I would say, like, what's the best form of marketing? A good product. All your marketing metrics get better when the product's better. But I would say the number one thing founders do wrong is they transition too quickly into the dial twisting part of the equation before perfecting the product. Because quite frankly, it's easier to twist dials and it's more fun to twist dials than it is to be like, we got to go back to the drawing board and meaningfully tweak our product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a lot of the dial twisting happening probably on both sides too, the product side and marketing. Cause that's such a great example. And I think takeaway for people, like when it comes to the differentiation, cause as a marketer and fractional kind of CMO, like all the clients that I work with, at some point, very early on, usually in the process, it's like, okay, here's kind of the positioning. Here's our differentiator, and it's the exact thing that you mentioned. Yeah, it might be a differentiator. You can't really argue with that, but is it a differentiator that anybody cares about? Because if it's not, or even like you said, if it's not in the top, two or three things, you're much better off just focusing on, what's the hook, that people are gonna be really, into, and then that maybe some of those other differentiators might be the thing that maybe seals the deal, or maybe it's sort of secondary or even tertiary in terms of like messaging. So that's where I think a lot of the dial turning comes in on the messaging, which is what I love. And it's not easy to do. It's sort of a humbling experience to like go through all that and go, yeah, maybe we were wrong. Maybe we don't want to be too stubborn and stick with something longer than we should. And it's like easier said than done. And sometimes you look in hindsight and you're like, oh, thank goodness we actually that we did that.
Totally.
Yeah. So all right. So you guys were obviously things were taking off. You're figuring out a lot of the messaging, figuring out different channels. At what point did you start to? I'm assuming start to like kind of listen to customers and have ideas for new products. And you guys have obviously some other products beyond just like the bars. Were those again almost like the differentiators? Were those things that you were like hearing from customers that they wanted, or the ideas that you guys had to say, hey, this is like a real natural fit in what we're doing, and kind of when did those two kind of come together?
It's a little bit of like the Steve Jobs thing. Don't If you just ask your customers what they want, you'll never create something great. And so once your product's in market, it's great to do that, to iterate and evolve. But in terms of layering on new offerings, oftentimes the path is not via asking customers what they want. It's in looking at it, just taking a step back and look at it strategically. And hey, where else do we think this brand has permission to operate in the marketplace? And there are a lot of sub questions to that. And there's a lot of criteria that any new category would have to hit to be interesting. It has to be light, long shelf life, e-com friendly, 40+% gross margin right out the gate before we even have meaningful volume. The category has to be hot and growing. The category has to be very large. It has to be able to work in in an omni-channel context, both online and offline, et cetera, et cetera. It's a long list. But then even in addition to all that is it just coherent with the brand ethos, which for us is brain and body nutrition, superior brain and body nutrition. Is it relevant to that and coherent with that? And so, hydration and caffeination were two areas that are different occasions throughout the day that we thought we had permission to solve, and checked all those boxes, right? Because, a hydrated body and brain is like table stakes for optimal performance. And caffeination obviously is a performance enhancing drug, quite literally, that we all engage in every morning, or most of us do. And of course turns your brain right on. And so, and our big categories and all the other things I mentioned. So there are pluses and minuses of taking that approach, right? Most people would start with a bar and then have bites and then protein balls and then peanut butter cups, and it's all sort of ancillary. But why we didn't like that is it's cannibalizing. It's cannibalizing. And it also is less habitual than things like caffeination and hydration. And so we wanted to do things that were entirely non-cannibalizing and ideally complementary, meaning if I consume this, I'm actually more likely to consume that, not I consume this instead of that. And then also we're habitual, and even more habitual than bars, which are, I guess, semi-habitual. So like coffee is like ultra habitual, right? We all drink, or I drink coffee every morning, and have forever. Ultra habitual. And So yeah, I think we just took a bit of a contrarian sort of perspective around all of it. So there are all these pluses to that. Like from an e-com standpoint, it helps you build a bigger basket because now, because it's complementary, I can increase my average order value from 25 to 55 because now some meaningful percentage of people are adding hydration to their bars, or not even buying bars. They're just buying hydration and coffee, or just coffee, but they're buying 2 months of worth of it. Right. So it's incredibly good for average order value building. And then it's great for LTV, right? Because you could churn out on the bars because of flavor fatigue, and then you pick up the hydration and you churn out on that and you go back to bars, and then eventually you go to coffee. So it helps every metric, e-commerce metric. Now, what are the downsides, right? Because it's obviously not all upside. There's a reason other people don't do this. Well, you're basically starting a new company because it's a different form factor. You need a different co-packer. It's like a mini startup within your startup. And that sucks in many ways. It's a giant operational lift, and you have no domain expertise in that new form factor. And so you got to get up the curve really rapidly on it. But that we also really like powder products because, quite frankly, they're easier to get up the curve on than bars, like way easier than bars. And so, yeah, that's how we thought about it. And I guess the last thing I would say is the beauty of hydration and coffee for us is we can be ultra focused with our go-to-market. So with bars, it's omni-channel. We sell bars everywhere. And we very intentionally restricted hydration and coffee to e-commerce, D2C as well as Amazon. And we're allowed to do that because that's not the hero product. And so we don't need to divide focus in too many ways. So yeah, that's where we are.
Yeah. And did you, at any point in time with, the new products, or even when you were just bars, did you have any moments where you were kind of surprised or found anything just kind of like really interesting about like who was buying your products? Like where did you have, I'm sure a lot of assumptions, because you could like think about your product, and even from the outside, you can kind of picture, okay, I think I get the target audience for this. But did you find, were there any surprises about, who is actually purchasing?
Yeah, many surprises. So bars and hydration and coffee, the consumer, just like I was giving the example earlier with bars versus chips, the consumer operates very, very differently and cares about very different things. Like, random example, sometimes people get all weird about natural flavors in bars, but they could not care less in hydration. It's a total non-issue, which is hilarious, right? It's the same consumer, it's the same thing, but like for some reason when I'm drinking an electrolyte mix, I'm totally cool with it over here, but not over here.
Yeah,
makes no sense, right? But is a very strong factor. So again, just we've had all these like light bulb moments around how people shop these things differently. In coffee, people get really emotional about, and they're like, where are the beans from, and what's the roast level, and da 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 da, and can I drink it hot versus cold, right? That's totally different because bars and hydration are always cold, and so that's a new dynamic. And there's just all these nuances within the categories. But in terms of who's consuming it, we very intentionally want the same person to be attracted to all three. The reality is you get actually a lot of people who only consume one, which is actually great, right? Because it means we wouldn't have gotten that person if we hadn't have rolled out the second and third category. Like, that person's would have been dead to us, right? And vice versa. So I actually love that because it's like, hell yeah, we snagged someone that we would have never gotten.
Yeah.
And but yeah, there's all these funny like hot spots when you look at the data. Chiropractors' offices. We sell to a zillion chiropractors' offices. I would have never in a million years told you that would be a slam dunk of a channel.
Yeah.
And yet it is. Nutritionists or registered dietitians' offices. I would have said maybe more readily that would be a possibility, but not to the extent it is. And so, yeah, it's just like the product feedback thing. And in terms of like looking at data and getting feedback and changing your product and branding and messaging around it, do the same thing with demographics. Okay, it looks like we're female, it's 70% females who
Yeah.
consume us. Okay, cool. Well, when we do sampling events, probably we want to do female forward events, right? Because we know that's our consumer. And there's all these other, obviously decisions we make based on really knowing who consumes the product.
Yeah. 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 I mean, there's so much to kind of schlep through, like the different demographics, the targeting, the channels, the messaging, the different product lines. Even though, marketing was sort of delegated for the most part to like other people internally, and then like working with a lot of external like marketing partners. What from your kind of point of view, like what were some of the biggest marketing challenges that you guys had, during those sort of like middle years, or I guess really any of the last couple of years, I should say?
The same thing everyone has, right? Which is CAC to LTV or LTV to CAC. How do you get your LTV higher and how do you get your CAC lower? Like, it's just like, and iOS changes and, when we first started, there were so many VC dollars in the ecosystem, and everyone and their brother was starting a CPG company. And so everyone was bidding up advertising costs. And so, I mean, these things like wax and wane. So, yeah, I mean, at a high level, those are our challenges. I would say we think a lot about marketing as it relates to brick and mortar, honestly. This year, for the first year, more than half our business is brick and mortar. And so we think a lot about what we do. We spend quite a few ad dollars via Instacart, via their ad platform. We spend quite a few dollars via Thrive Market, via their ad platform. We spend quite a few dollars on Walmart.com. There are all these, and some of those are e-commerce marketplaces, and then some are brick and mortar. But then we also do so much in-store stuff, right? We do promos, we'll buy end caps. And so like that stuff is just as important and sometimes more important than how's our LTV to CAC doing on our D2C site.
Yeah.
And I think people don't really appreciate that, like, getting on a shelf is a Facebook ad. There's nothing different about it. Either way, eyeballs walk by you and look at your product. In fact, it's better than a Facebook ad because, well, it's better in some ways and worse, right? You can't have all these call outs and you're not isolated in a feed, but I could literally touch you and you're sitting right there and maybe I hadn't heard of you. And in one case, I'm paying for those eyeballs. In the other case, it's free. And so, like, if you're in Costco, you're just getting tens of thousands of free impressions on not just a product on a shelf, but your entire palette. Like, think how powerful that is.
Yeah.
And it's free. So oftentimes when you look at, isolate the P&Ls of, not that brick and mortar is not really expensive to do, but, oftentimes the P&L for brick and mortar channels is quite a bit more favorable than e-commerce. So it's just good to diversify, though, right?
Yeah.
Like, because maybe you lose that brick and mortar account and it's like, well, damn, I wish I had a better e-com business. And also, people don't talk about this enough. This flywheel is like an overused word, but it really is the case that one feeds the other and vice versa. Online feeds offline, offline feeds online. It's a whole thing of a consumer has to see your brand, whatever it is, 8 times before they convert. Well, if you're in store and online, you only have to get 4 online impressions because you're going to get the other 4 in store. And so it just gives you more at-bats with the consumer. And it just makes everything more efficient.
Yeah, and they definitely hold different weight too, I think, depending on where they're seeing you and how you're showing up. And I'm guessing that if you've got, more of a focus on brick and mortar in the last year or so, it maybe that goes hand in hand too with you mentioned a little bit earlier, the guys are spending a little bit more on kind of like top of funnel, like awareness, uh, versus maybe just the sole focus on like performance marketing. What kind of stuff have you guys been doing? Kind of sounds like maybe just kind of dipping your toes in that real like top of funnel kind of strategy. What kind of stuff are you guys doing or trying?
Yeah, we're doing streaming TV. We're podcast is probably the biggest top of the funnel thing we're doing, um, which we kicked off last year and we've really accelerated into this year. We're doing a really big partnership with a celebrity chef.
Oh, okay.
That'll go live in a couple months here, and that'll, I think, drive giant top of the funnel awareness.
Yeah.
We're ramping up PR, which I think is going to be great for awareness. So it's a smattering of things, but in terms of dollars, podcast is the biggest.
Yeah. And what does that look like when you say podcast? What do you mean specifically?
Well, so we use a really great third party for that, and basically they just look at all the. First of all, they have preferred rates with all the big shows, and they look at our product set and they know which shows generally for our product types products convert the best, and they know who will do the best ad reads and
gotcha.
Blah, right?
So advertising with the podcast.
Yeah.
Okay.
As well as doing this, right? Like I go on most podcasts that I get invited on. Could be 100 people, could be 1,000 people, could be 10,000 an episode. Because it's just like I want to get in, even if it's 100 more people's ears, I want to get in their ears. Like, it's worth it to do that. But no, I mean, in terms of like scaling up massively, it's advertising.
Yeah. The podcast space is just so interesting, and I mean, this is really the first I've dipped my toes in. But like, there's obviously like for clients, there's the advertising side of it. There's the promotions and sort of like sponsorships and kind of getting your product to show up in places, and then there's being guests on podcasts, and all the ones that are not fit squarely in one of those categories. So it's evolving so quickly, but tons of opportunities there. What kind of things today are you most excited about in terms of the future? Where you guys are taking things? Are there trends? I'm sure there's probably not huge giant like industry earth-shattering trends that are happening, but like what kind of stuff are you excited about, whether it's kind of internal or external, for where you guys are, where you're taking things?
I would say the biggest trend is offline, honestly. We grow really nicely, and I would say linearly online, but in the last few years we've started growing exponentially offline. And because we've been doing online so much longer, I think there's just more green pasture and in front of us on offline. And then offline is kind of a momentum game too. Like once you get retailer X, it's easier to get retailer Y, which is then easier to get retailer Z. And so I would say like for us internally and as a business, offline exponential growth is like a giant trend. And how do we win in every account? Because every account's different consumer base, different offering, different price point, et cetera. I think there's a big trend. This is very unsexy and like not what most people talk about, but I think about price a lot and I think about value a lot. And I mean, we've all seen what's happening in the markets in the last few days and with tariffs. And I mean, man, I think we might be headed for a recession, whether it's a shallow or a deep recession. I don't know, but there's that. And then the fact that the consumer is starting to look tapped out. So retail sales were down year over year in January, as well as February. A lot of big retailers are sounding the alarm on that. And as we know, the consumer has higher debt levels than it ever has. And so what's going to win, what's going to carry the day in 2025 and beyond, in my opinion, is value. Premium and luxury items at least in the food and bev world, I think will struggle. And I think, quite frankly, more premium retailers will struggle. And so I obsess over how do we fit really well into that. Because if we can drive value, we can grow right through those macro dynamics versus them negatively. Like we can literally be inversely correlated to macroeconomic trends in terms of our growth.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just getting and like, how do you do that? It really starts with excellent supply chain and operations and manufacturing and fulfillment, right? Like operations of all types, because that allows you to price really competitively and drive really great value. So I think like value players will just crush it in 2025 and beyond.
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll be one of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. There's so much. It's weird. It feels like there is so much unknown going on right now. Like everything is kind of crazy, but then it really, at the same time, how you just laid it out seems like perfectly logical and almost like should be expected based on having all that unknown. So in a weird way, it's the known coming out of the unknown. I did want to ask you a question again, not so I think this question I normally ask folks who probably have a little bit more focus on marketing and sort of running like a marketing program. But I'll tweak it for you. So as like the CEO of a company, the founder of a company, where marketing is not your maybe thing that you love the most, but it is part of the job. What's the advice that you would give to like other founders and other CEOs that might be similar to you, that you found successful of just again kind of steering the ship a little bit without it marketing being that thing that you like really love to like roll up your sleeves and kind of get your hands dirty?
Yeah, I mean, and again, whether or not I love it is irrelevant.
Yeah.
It has to happen to
Yeah.
be great. So for me personally, I would go way back to first principles, what I was talking about earlier. Find someone who really does love it and find the person who's objectively best at it and get them on either internally on your brand or externally on your brand.
So you're saying you're saying marry somebody who is really great at marketing, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
ideally. Yeah, combine work streams of your life.
All right, right.
We could do a whole podcast on working with your spouse as well. But yeah, I mean, I've said some of the things that I would that would be my advice. Product is marketing. Product is marketing. Being on a physical shelf is marketing. Like, expand your aperture of how you think about marketing, because it's all marketing. And a better product and a product with more touch points is better marketing. So I think most people like nerd out on whatever cost caps on Meta all day long, and like they lose the forest for the trees a bit on, hey, have you considered what it would do for your marketing metrics if your product was 10% better, or if you had a flywheel in action of you being on shelves at Walmart and Target in addition to selling online? Have you considered that? Because yeah, I'm sure you can bring like there's always going to be someone who can sound really smart and maybe be really smart on twisting dials around the standard marketing channels we all know. I think there's very few people who think about marketing more holistically. And I guess the other thing would be like, it's similar. This harkens back to the Kickstarter. What are things you can do that have excellent marketing value but cost you $0 or cost you only dollars in a context of winning, like pay for performance contexts? And so I think this big partnership we're doing is an example of the latter. And so it's not improving our Meta ad, our customer acquisition costs on Meta by 20%. It's instead like doing something way different over here by partnering with the right person who has the right profile, who appeals to the right demographic, and driving a bunch of sales on our Shopify site in so doing. And so again, it's like elevate beyond the dial twisting, and like what is the full panoply of options available to you. There's a really good book on, I guess you could say it's on marketing, called Traction by Gabriel Weinberg and I think Nick Mares, either Nick Mares or Justin Mares, they're brothers. And it's basically like, think of all the marketing channels that exist. There's like snail mail, there's events, there's cold calling, there's door-to-door sales, there's Facebook ads, there's of course TikTok ads, there's of course blah, 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 blah. But what are just all of them? And you should actually run a test in every single one of them. This is why a company like Postpilot's doing so well. They brought back direct mail. They brought back snail mail. And it converts insanely well relative to whatever, let's say a meta ad. And so if you're not considering that, you're just leaving money on the table. So I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, consider everything. Think about marketing in a holistic way. But before you do any of it, obsess over the product, because everything else is downstream of the product.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. I mean, there's so many things that are easy to test and easy to kind of see what the ROI is. And those are great. But I do think a lot of people sometimes will have a little bit of tunnel vision on those channels because they have a little bit of like the illusion of they're a little bit safer or they're a little bit more predictable, when sometimes they are. But yeah, I think just getting outside of that and looking at all of the other, opportunities. And I think my first career, like right out of college, I was at an agency and we did a ton of direct mail, and that was, forever ago. And so it's probably, I've been, in marketing long enough now where it's like that is now like maybe coming back a little bit, and people are realizing that nothing in marketing ever really dies. Like people say, email's dead, direct mail's dead. It's like, well, that's never true. It's just either areas are super crowded or, maybe long enough goes by where, yeah, you kind of have to go back and rediscover
TV.
some of those. Yeah.
Remnant TV. I know brands that do great with remnant TV. They buy cheap TV ad space that for some channel that has 1,000 viewers, but just so happens it's really cheap, and those are the perfect demographical overlap with their demographic.
Yeah.
So it's you're right. Nothing ever dies.
Yep. All right. Well, I want to, be respectful of your time. I appreciate sitting down with me. It's been a great conversation. I did want to ask you one last question. It has nothing to do with marketing, but it is something that I'm very interested in, just chatting with a bunch of founders, being, sort of on my own and running, my own consulting business. I'm just very interested on how other people figure out good ways to unplug, unwind. What do you do to relax? Like when you're not working, running the company, there obviously you have family and social life, but like what do you do to just sort of get away from it, turn your brain off, however you want to say it?
Nothing groundbreaking, but exercise is a big one.
Yeah.
I'm like obsessed with sauna lately. I sauna every day now for like half an hour. I was doing cold plunge, but that one's tapered off. But I'm obsessed with sauna. And so I guess the commonality there is just raise your heart rate, get your blood pumping. It totally resets you, right? I think you want to like ideally have these demarcation points throughout your day. It's not healthy to be working literally all day, although in the early years I certainly was. But like whatever it is, at 6 p.m., if you can elevate your heart rate, it like adds this physical demarcation to your day, such that afterwards you're like, oh, that's like the post-work day. I might still answer a few emails, but I'm like kind of chilled out and I got my sweat in. And so that's huge. I got a dog recently. I got this little dachshund, this wiener dog called Taco.
Oh, nice.
And I'm obsessed with this dog. So that has made my life a lot better. It's just like it's just funny to have a wiener dog running around while you're like stressing about stuff, and you just look over and you're like, oh, that's adorable. It just adds like a little bit of like levity to your day.
Yeah.
There is something to the animal, like the therapeutic nature of animals that I've experienced in a very real way.
Yeah.
I don't know. And then just like go to dinner with your wife, go for walks, like just the little interaction stuff with your spouse.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I've learned. It doesn't have to be big things. It can be, it can be small things. Like it's not like you have to get away from work and go golf for 4 or 5 hours, which I would love to do, but nobody has time. Nobody has time for that. I've got 2 little kids and I'm always working, and I have a dog as well, but he's a 100-pound golden retriever. So there's different challenges with having that. But yeah, I think it's a lot of times it is just those small things. So, Will, I appreciate it. Glad to kind of have you on and chat with you for a little bit. I'll let you go, let you get back to your wife, get back to Taco. And yeah, it was great chatting.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. Appreciate it. Have a good one.